Karamo Report, pursuing the truth, dissolving the complexities of religion, culture, and politics.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Karamo Report. It's Kristina Karamo. The issue of election integrity is something that many people were up in arms about after the 2020 election, when we realized that our election system is heavily compromised, overly complicated, and it is a threat to our national survival. Why? Because our Declaration of Independence states that governments instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Now, how do we, the governed, give our consent? When we vote. If our election systems are compromised, that means other people are making the decisions about who's in government, making decisions about our lives instead of us. So today I'm going to be interviewing Phani Mantrivadi. He is an independent election data analyst and full stack IT developer with 24 years of IT experience. He conceptualized, designed, and developed checkmyvote.org. Despite Phani's technological background, he believes technology should be used with limitations. He believes human judgment and intuition should not be taken over by technology. Recently, Phani testified before the Michigan House Election Integrity Committee regarding what he discovered in our qualified voter file, known also as the voter registration database of corrupted voter registrations.
And this is what it comes back to trust. Public trust is eroding. The answer that we get most of the time from the Secretary of State is there was a glitch. There was a glitch, there was a glitch, there was a glitch. What do you get when you have glitchy election systems? We'll get a glitchy SOS.
This testimony just happened recently, and it's important that the issue of securing our elections and remedying systemic election corruption never goes away, even if the guy we like is currently in office. Everyone, welcome Phani. Thank you so much, Phani, for joining us.
How are you doing, Kristina?
I'm doing great. So, Phani, you've been involved in election integrity fight for several years. That's how we got to know each other. And additionally, you have your organization, Check My Vote, which is so important regarding cleaning up the voter rolls, which is a link in the chain of systemic election corruption. Recently, you gave your testimony, in case the audience is unaware, in front of the Michigan House Election Integrity Committee. And I think one of the important points you mentioned is that there are multiple issues with our election system, but your focus is Check My Vote and cleaning up the voter rolls. Could you start by telling the audience, how did you get involved? How did you discover the problems with the election system, specifically pertaining to the voter rolls?
Well, thank you, Kristina, for having me on today. My journey with election integrity began in the wake of the November 3rd, 2020 election, when the evidence that existed largely was circumstantial or theoretical, where, if you remember the TCF Center pizza boxes, that raised doubts, but it wasn't conclusive evidence that it raised a lot of questions in people's minds. And also, there were instances that were reported of people having, ineligible people having voted in the 2020 election, whether it is deceased people or whether it is just non-citizens or any other categories, non-existent people, even moved out people from a state, so on. And I obviously fell in one of those categories, that being a non-citizen, I wanted to check, the disposition of my own voting history record, of which there shouldn't be any because I wasn't a US citizen back then, and even now I'm not, but that's a separate story for another day. But I decided to look for my own record, and there wasn't any, but there were two people registered to vote from one of my addresses, which were my tenants were living there. So that's when I kind of got involved. I went to the clerk and asked them about the two people, and the clerk was friendly enough, local township clerk, just removed both of them. But a lot of people got interested in the fact that, I had the voter rolls, and they wanted to see what it looks like, what their address looks like, who's registered to vote, and so on. They were curious about their method of voting as recorded in the voting history files. So I started to look them up and give them information through Telegram or my email, just reply. But at some point, obviously, it became unsustainable because I was doing 50 a day. It was in the middle of 2021. And I started building a website so people can do this themselves. The first feature that I built was the Audit My Address feature. And also it would show any individual's voting history. So essentially, I felt the need to bring transparency to the Michigan's voter rolls. much needed transparency. And often I wondered, why wasn't such a tool already there? It's one of the most advanced countries in the world. Why doesn't such a tool exist? But saw an opportunity there to build this, and it just grew organically after that.
Yeah, let me jump in real quick, because your story of how you got in this situation. When I was campaigning for Secretary of State, I had a story shared with me. A man who was an American citizen, his wife and his wife's mother were from Brazil. They're legally in the country, but they were not citizens, and they were terrified because some absentee ballots had came to their houses in their home in the name of his wife and his mother-in-law. And as you know, and going through this process yourself, that if a
Hmm.
person, and it's years to become a citizen,
Right.
and if a person is found to have voted and they're
Hmm.
not a citizen, they will lose the process and be deported. So
Exactly.
he said that his wife and his wife's mother were absolutely terrified. Can you just, I mean, for yourself,
Hmm.
and this poor guy, and can you imagine a woman, you're here legally, you're going through the citizenship process, and then somebody, because they're evil and wicked, they want to cast a ballot in your name, and now you're
Hmm.
terrified that you're going to be deported, separated from your husband, your family. And who's going to believe that I didn't do it, somebody else voted in my name? So I heard that story on multiple occasions. Also situations where a woman, I was out in Genesee County at an event, and this guy or a woman, I can't remember who exactly the individual, but they were saying that their sister
Hmm.
was registered to vote at their home in their maiden name, in her
Right.
maiden name,
Yeah.
even though the sister had been married for over 20 years and lived somewhere else.
Right.
So these people were, it is clearly something coming out the Secretary of State's office, because the Secretary of State knows who is who. They're
Hmm.
the keeper of the records. So they
Right.
know who's who, they know where you live, who's dead. They know all those details, who's related to whom. They know all of this.
Right.
So the reality is only the secretary, and I shouldn't say only, but
Hmm.
this, you had to have some involvement in the Secretary of State's office in order to carry this out, to know who's related to who. So you can know to register somebody at an address that their sibling lives at, but registering their maiden name. I mean, or people who've had parents that were dead for 20 years register at their house, or people you've never heard of register at their house. So and here's the thing, Funny, I believe that people oftentimes are kind of tired of us election integrity people talking about it's like Trump won. Why are you guys still complaining? But one of the things that people don't understand is that the presidential election isn't the only election on the ballot. And they are compromising all other elections. And it would behoove these thieves of our liberty, when they steal elections, to not steal the presidential election, because what's going to happen to most election integrity people? They're going to go to sleep. So they can tolerate a 4-year Trump presidency, and all of us election integrity people go away, and everybody think everything is fine, and rig races all the way down the ballot, and nobody will say anything. What say you?
Well, that's exactly right, because it's not about one party or another. It's not about one candidate or another. It's not about Trump or anyone else. This is about accuracy and transparency into the voter rolls and elections as a whole. And my position remains the same. I really don't care about the result. I do not care who wins the election, as long as it's held transparently and the process is transparent too.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, it's, again, let's say, uh, how did Trump win? Let's say, he beat the system, right? There was an overwhelming majority of people who came out to vote. But if you think about it, it's unsustainable, because you cannot expect your local school board candidate to have the charisma, or whatever you want to call it, to have those kind of rallies and bring people up to vote for them, right? So people who are running for these lower races that directly affect your community, right? School boards, or your township, or your local areas, commissioners maybe, they're all actually having a direct impact on your life at the precinct level. So presidency is so far removed, and while Trump is actually busy with removing obstacles that get in the way of states being autonomous, right? It's essentially
Mm-hmm.
give power back to the states. And when power comes back to the states, election integrity becomes even more important, because the people who are getting elected at the state level should win fairly and transparently.
Mm-hmm.
And compromised election systems are an apex level threat to the survival of our families and the nation as a whole, because the nation is made up of families. The families network, everything is what makes the nation, friends and family. And you're exactly right on that. So I am striving to get accuracy to voter rolls. And the second thing is that people are losing trust in election outcomes, which is not a good place to be, because it always becomes about one candidate or the another. One person, if they don't, if the opposing candidate wins, they say, "Oh, I don't trust this outcome." And there's always going to be, people will always have differences on who they vote for, right? And that's a healthy place where you have disagreements, you agree, but in the end, you accept that candidate A won, even though you voted for candidate B. But you are happy with the fact that, well, the process was transparent. The way the republic works is how it's working.
Yeah. And Phani, I think you hit an important point, if you could elaborate on, is that people are losing trust in the system. Because with people losing trust in the system, not only did they not vote, but they don't participate further than that. Because voting is one responsibility we have as far as civic engagement goes. But
Uh-huh.
our civic engagement does not end at the ballot box. We have to ensure that these elected officials are serving the will of the people and protecting and defending our constitutional rights. I mean,
Right.
also to a point you said that about retain the states having this power, because the states are the ones who create the federal government. But
Right.
additionally, if the federal government gets out of control, our protection is our state governments. So this is so
Mm.
important. So if citizens feel as though the elections are rigged, it's a waste of my time, they check out of the process altogether. And then essentially we have runaway government where we can just have tyrants filling these positions and we can't get rid of them. And then if they know that the system is rigged, then they feel like I can do whatever they want because it doesn't matter. They're not going to be able to get rid of me. What say you on that?
Oh, absolutely. See, people checking out of the system leads to low propensity voters. That's what the whole big set of people in the voter rolls are. They're low propensity voters. And very often, through the use of my website, the Check My Vote, through the use of Check My Vote, I don't want to say my website, it's the people's website. I built it, but you know what? It's the people's website. Through the use of the website, people have found out that they're recorded as having voted, where they have checked out of the voting process. The only reason they're checking to see is because of all the questions being raised, and they said they wanted to check if their identity was stolen to vote. Because even if you don't vote, you'd be mad if your identity is stolen to vote,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're checked out of the process. So we see that a lot, and a lot of people come back putting messages in the website saying, I did not vote. Why does your website say I voted? And that's why I said my website, because I have to tell them that no, it's not my website. It is the data that's coming from the SOS that we're showing to you, bringing transparency. And that's basically what they want. They want these low propensity voters to be on there so they can just cast a ballot on their name.
Yeah, also, I don't know if you remember, but something similar happened to me, but the reverse. The Secretary of State was claiming that I did not vote. And what was
Right.
very interesting, I had somebody contact me because at the time I'm running for Secretary of State, and I received a
Hmm.
contact like, you didn't vote in the 2020 election? Well, that's what the Secretary of State records say. And so CNN began reporting that I didn't vote, which is absurd. I mean, I didn't go to the TCF Center for 36 hours to just not vote,
Right.
and be a, state committee woman, one of the a spokesperson for the Oakland County Republican Party, volunteering for the party to just sit up and not vote. That's
Right.
completely not nonsense. So what wound up happening was I went and I FOIA'd my application to vote. So if folks aren't aware, every state has a different process. So in Michigan, you go into your precinct and then you fill out a little paper for that's called an application to vote, and
Mhm.
that's you fill out the paper, and then after that you receive your ballot. So they check your ID and then they fill out this paper, and then they file that paper and put the ballot number on with your voter number, and the ballot number goes on that application to vote. So I FOIA'd my application to vote, proving that I voted. And when I went to my local clerk to ask, like, hey, why is the Secretary of State saying I didn't vote when here's my application to vote?
Mhm.
And he just really didn't have a clear answer for me. And it was like, well, we had these multiple systems. Like, you guys are full of garbage. You're lying because number one, when you vote, the precinct reports to the city
Mhm.
reports to the county reports to the state. That is a chain of command. There's not multiple systems, multiple
Right.
databases. They were manipulating the numbers. So I myself have been a victim of this
Right.
and wondering, was my vote in 2020 even counted? Because if
Mm.
you guys had me not as voting, I don't know my vote counted. And then
Right.
several months later, it was almost, I believe, almost a year later, finally my vote history showed up saying that I did
Right.
vote. So why is it almost, I mean, it'd been like 8 months to a year later that the Secretary of State is saying that I have voted? So that obviously these people are corrupting the system. So it's not just them corrupting the system, but then there's the cover up. So can you
Hmm.
talk about some of the pushback you've received from elected officials, from election officials, judges? What pushback have you received for trying to get to the bottom of the systemic election corruption element we see via the voter rolls?
Well, the pushback isn't always direct, right? They're not going to come and say we're going to take your site down or whatnot. But the first thing we saw was pertaining to the vote method type in the QVF voter history file, where it shows how it's recorded as someone has voted, like absentee or in person.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays early also, but uh, 2024 early in the winter of early 2024, I got communication from the BOE saying they're not going to be releasing that voting method type field anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason given was obviously not like, yeah, we're not going to give it to you, but there is a reason always. They make up some reason, but that reason ostensibly is that after the introduction of the early voting method, there were some precincts where only one person went in and voted. That really speaks to how popular this early voting method is.
Mm-hmm.
Spend millions of dollars to put that program together, but there are precincts there's only one person going and using that mode of voting. But they said because of that, I would be able to go to the precinct reporting results page where it kind of tells you how many voted Republican, Democrat, Independent, so on, right? And if
Mm-hmm.
there's only one person, I can easily tell that this individual who voted early, because there's only one, and that one person voted Democrat, so I'd be violating their constitutional right to secret ballot. So, well, let's just go with that argument for the argument's sake. I'm not going to push back on that because I do not want to violate anybody's constitutional right to secret ballot, right? Well, then only justifies a minimal amount of redaction, which comprises like we did the math because this is so funny because February I got the email saying they're not going to give me the field. April's QVF of 2024, by mistake, they released the list of all the people who voted early, and there were 81,000 of them in the uh, February 2024 primary election. And I did some math, and I saw that basically about 161 precincts out of the 4,500 precincts, they had one person voting early. So that's about 1.5% or something, less than that, 2% maybe. So for want of protecting the constitutional right of 1.5% ostensibly, they have redacted the entire column for the entire 100% of the 8.1 million, or right now it's 8.19 million in the file. So where there's a partial redaction justified, they redacted the entire thing. So that's a pushback, in my opinion, because, well, why can't you redact just the 1.5%? Like you've seen FOIA requests fulfilled with personal information removed and partial redaction, those black boxes. You could
Mm-hmm.
do that, but no. Their argument is that it's impractical. Well, excuse me, but FOIA law does not have a impracticality clause in it.
Correct.
It's like if the record is responsive and it doesn't is not exempt due to
Mm-hmm.
personally identifiable information or any of that, then it is supposed to be fulfilled. It's supposed to be released. It comprises public record. So that's one of the pushbacks we got. And other than that, it's mostly like, people refusing to acknowledge that this is a problem, as you've seen in the testimonies question and answer session, where some of the questions were, I guess, fair enough, about the fees and no, but there are some questions that were like, I was like appalled at. Well, here I am spending about 40 minutes trying to give you concrete examples of why I think there is a really horrible state in the as it pertains to list maintenance of Michigan's voter file, and I think it was Representative May Song. She comes out asking if I think the 2024 election was safe and secure and was stolen. Now, excuse me, but this is like house is on fire and you're a fireman running to save the people inside. You run into the fire, and you, instead of saving these people from there, you ask them, do you think your neighbor set your house on fire? you know that's the kind of analogy I could give for this. But it was appalling that she refused to acknowledge that the problem was the horrid state of voter file. Instead of, I mean, she thinks that I am coming there with an agenda or a motive to say something. But no, I went there with hope. I did not go there with a motive. I went there to the testimony with hope that people are going to acknowledge that there is a problem with the voter rolls.
But
But it's
my opinion of her, she's an opportunist. I give it to you, fine. You're a very kind person, but you're being very charitable to this woman. I think she's a complete opportunist, was hoping to score political points at your expense, and not just your expense, but at the expense of the Michiganders. And she's so pathetic because she was reading from a script. So this
right.
clearly was not an original thought. She's sitting there reading and trying to collect her words. If I had a question for you that generally came out of my mind, I need to read and collect my
Right.
words. It's a simple question. Do you think the
Exactly.
2024 election was stolen? I mean,
Right.
I don't need to read it. So yeah,
And
Mahjong
I could, oh,
she's
she
horrible.
rubbed her two brain cells for 45 minutes to come up with that question, and she had to read it from a sheet of paper. It's unbelievable.
Exactly. Yeah, that was bogus. But that's interesting that they claim that if one person votes early votes early, then somehow that would violate their secret ballot. It's like, no, it wouldn't, because you still don't know who they voted for. unless
Well,
unless you guys are looking at their ballots and posting results that early, which you're not supposed to do. They're not supposed to tally those ballots till election day. So they there's something clearly wrong. It makes me think after the 22 election, someone I know, I don't know if they want their identity disclosed. They probably wouldn't care, but since I didn't ask, I'll leave it as that. I spoke to someone about FOIAing the list of people who had their absentee ballots sent to a different address than their registration. So, if people are unaware that a gentleman in Wisconsin had requested the absentee ballot of Speaker Voss in Wisconsin, and had it sent to his house, which is illegal, but he did it to prove a point that I can have anybody's absentee ballot rerouted to my
right.
house.
Yep.
And so in Michigan, I just need like the last four digits of your social security number, your date of birth, your address, and I can have anybody's absentee ballot rerouted to my house. So after this individual I know FOIA'd the list in 2022 of people who had their absentee ballots rerouted to a different address, there were duplicates. I mean, 4 or 5
Yeah.
times the same name shows up. 4
Oh,
or
yeah.
5 times the same name, or all of them going to a similar addresses. So the one person 5 times requested an absentee ballot to be sent to an alternate address. So clearly the Secretary of State sent us a corrupted file. So this is part of it, why they don't want the method of voting to be shared with the public, because that's one of the ways we detect their criminal activity. What say
hmm
you?
Oh, absolutely. I think even in the 2024 election on October 28th, I have a FOIA request that uh, basically gives me the daily absentee reports, as they're
Mm-hmm.
called. So every day it gives you a tally of how many absentee ballots were sent out and how many of them voted. On October 28th, 2024, we there was a huge spike in excess votes. Like, in the sense, there was one individual from Detroit, it looks like, voted 29 times using absentee method, with 29 ballots sent to the alternate address. So there were many such examples in that voting file. I think 125,428 excess votes according to the October 28th file. So uh, that got caught before it got worse. But the next day's file, October 29th file, they all got scrubbed. And an explanation was given saying that people who had moved residences, this was on the SOS's website, saying this was the explanation. It was a glitch, glitch, right? So, well, what do you get when you have glitchy election systems? You got a glitch in Whitmer. So, so you got glitchy people who are elected officials. So that's what happens.
You know,
But
you know, Phani, what's interesting, you say that when I ran for SOS, one of the things I discovered that of the monies that the Secretary of State brings in from various fees they collect from all of us, over 90% of that money goes to the general fund. So if they
right.
have a glitchy election system, how about they take some of that money that they give to the general fund, which is like a bottomless pit, and put it
Uh-huh.
back into the Secretary of State's office and put it back into our election system? So Fonnie, I would argue that you are not buying their whole glitch explanation. What
No,
say
not at
you?
all. Oh, absolutely not. Because I went and said, okay, let's go with the explanation they're giving us. Let's just find out what's at the bottom of this all. So they said, like, the explanation given
Mhm.
was many of these people, it's actually 82,000, some 647 people voting 200 and sometimes, so excess of 125, 428. That's how that number came about, right?
Mhm.
So all these 82,647 people, according to the SOS's explanation, have had past addresses that they moved around in Michigan, like change of address. And that's how they got pulled into the report. And it was a data formatting error, is what she said, what the reason said. And then I looked and found out that out of this 82,647 people, only 50,100 people moved in the last 2 years. And also, in the last 2 years, there were a total of 228,000 people who moved. So why didn't the glitch affect the other people who moved? Why did it affect only the 80,000 people, not the 212,000 people who had addresses moved? And if you go further back in time, like if you take a 4-year move period, the my argument becomes stronger
Mm-hmm.
because more people move as time passes. The number gets higher, right? So even
Mm-hmm.
smallest increment of 2 years, you have 212,000 people who moved, and only the glitch affected 82,647 people.
The Karama Report needs you, so please like, share, and subscribe. You can also support this project by making a contribution. We greatly appreciate your support. Now back to the show. Well, and I
Yeah.
also want the audience to know, just for clarification purposes, that you are a credible person to speak on this subject because of your IT and computer programming knowledge. So it's not, I mean, it makes sense to me. I have zero knowledge about computer programming and how computer systems works beyond on off button and a few switches. But the reason I'm saying this for the audience to understand that you're a person who's well versed and you know well how computer programs, you know how to program computers. So you're a person qualified to speak on this subject. So I think that's a very, very important point. And they rely, in my opinion, on this whole glitch farce to
Mm.
hope that we don't understand and won't ask questions. Would you agree with this notion that I believe that our election systems have been intentionally overly complicated? That way, it's more difficult for citizens to detect the corruption because of your expertise. Professionally speaking, you're in a better position to detect some of these things because you understand IT. But would you agree with my position that they've made this election system overly complicated to make corruption easier?
Absolutely. I'd put it in present continuous tense instead of saying they have made it overly complicated. They're continuing to do it
Mhm.
because they want to get rid of transparency. If you look at the ranked choice voting, it's impossible to trace back what happened if you put ranked choice voting in place.
Mhm.
It's a ratio. It's like you voted 0.2% to this person, 0.5, 50% to this person, and then the result is like a mathematical sum. So everything they're doing is to reduce transparency. So this is engineered complexity. This is engineered inefficiency at work. Things are deliberately made complex. And as a simple example, I'll tell you this one, this up until August 2024, the daily absentee ballot reports were comprised of one file, just one file. Simple enough, right? A list of
Mhm.
people who were sent absentee ballots, how many of them voted. There's a field that says voted or not, and there's a field that says when was the absentee ballot sent to them, and they returned it, or where the Yuokawa was it spoiled, or the ballot ID. Those fields are all there, one file. I had a program that I wrote to process it. I'd take the file, put it in a folder, and it processes it. Same format existed for February 2024 and even prior. November 2024, what they did, they broke this one file into 5 files with so much redundancy, like the address is present in 5 files. Now, my program has to, if we have 5 addresses for an ad person, my program has to look at, are they different? Are they same? In many cases they're the same, but why did they have to break it into five? And there's also things like ballot ID and application sent, received, Yuokawa, spoiled indicator. These are all missing. These were all missing. And when I went and asked them for it, they charged me $459 extra fee to give me the same fields that I used to get for less than half the fee up until August 2024. So this is like two ways of getting transparency. Number one, increase the fees so that every time you change the fee, people drop out of making the FOIA request.
Correct.
You know. Number two, make it so complicated every time. Just change the format and do this and do that. We saw that with the files being broken out into five instead of one. There was no problem with the previous file. Why solve a problem that doesn't exist? Solve the problems that exist.
Yeah, I do want to go back 1 second. Could you please explain what ranked choice voting is for the audience? I'm sure many who are watching have heard ranked choice voting being talked about by folks like yourself, Pat Colbeck, and many others. Can you please talk about what exactly is ranked choice voting?
Okay, so that's a great question. Let's put it in as simple terms as possible. So when you go and cast a ballot, you choose a candidate to vote for, right? Usually you say,
Hmm.
I vote for this person. And in a ranked choice voting scenario, you're not just voting for one person, you are ranking your choices. You're basically saying, my top choice is candidate A, my second top choice is candidate B, my third is, this, my fourth is this. There could be up to 5 candidates. I don't know how many there are, but you are ranking your candidates. And what they do is they take, if you voted candidate A as top and somebody else voted candidate A as second, they do some sort of mathematical calculation to say, okay, candidate A got 80% of the vote in the second ballot because it was second choice. In the first choice, candidate A got, again, I guess, some percentage of the vote. So it's not just one vote, it's like a fraction. So they're doing this dilution of a vote, like you're not voting for a person, you're voting, a certain percentage of your vote goes to one person, so a small other person goes to the other person. So this is overly complicated because to find out who won, you really need to know how the program works, and they'll probably get a vendor to write a program to do this calculation, and it'll be proprietary, of course,
Of course.
because
Of
it's all
course.
proprietary. Third parties, it's like intellectual property, whatever they want to call it, they'll say that and say, well, this is the result that came out, and our algorithm is proprietary. We cannot tell you how it works, but this is the result. So they want to be able to put all this counting process inside a box, black box, and not let anybody see through it. There's no transparency, and that's what ranked choice voting is essentially, just to complicate the voting process a little bit.
I think it's an important point for the audience who may again be, because one of the things about the election integrity subject is because a lot of it is so technical that the average citizen, their eyes just kind of glaze over. So I'm really kind of trying to simplify as much as I can for folks who may not have some of the background knowledge of it, because like when you talk about black box voting, and just for folks who may not be aware, you're talking about the computer program, the actual
Right.
algorithm is kept secret. That way,
Right.
no one knows actually how it's going to be calculated. And that's one of the problems we have right now with our election system. You have folks like David Clement, who's been really railing about the election machines, because many of these machines in Michigan, it's in our law that it is the source code for the tabulation machines is kept complete secret. So we
Right.
have no idea how they're tabulating our votes. And this is the problem. If the people who are in government, they make decisions about our lives, they have the power to jail us if they want to. So
Right.
we have to be able to make sure we're picking the people who got these types of decisions over our lives. And if we're not able to pick these people, that means somebody else is picking them for us, and it's not going to be with our best interests at mind. So that's why this is so ludicrous, them pushing ranked choice voting. I know in some areas of Michigan, they've been pushing it heavy. It's so they can rig our elections and take our freedoms away. And people need to understand that this issue may be kind of tedious for some folks, but it's something they need to understand, because there's this, there's, I may get in trouble for saying this, but there's either the ballot or the bullet is how countries are controlled, either through war or voting. That's it.
Yeah,
There's no other
absolutely.
way a country is controlled. A leadership is picked. And fortunately, thank Jesus that we live in a country where we vote who we want and we don't go fighting each other. So yeah, nevertheless, you were saying something. I apologize.
Oh no, you're good. Thank you. I was excited because you're literally taking the words out of my mouth in that regard. And black box testing is actually a term in IT where when let's say you're driving a car and you can't open the hood, you can't see anything that's under the hood, you can't take out the tires, you just drive the car and it works. That is black box, meaning you just see the outcome and you see the results. A white box testing is where you're able to open up the hood, for example, and see if the battery is working okay, or the engine is doing good. You can kind of look at the individual parts and see if they're working okay. So that is white box approach. Like iPhone, you can't even open up and swap out a battery, for example. So everything is kind of proprietary and it's all boxed in. So that's what black box testing is and white box. But again, to your point about people governing, if people don't take interest in elections or any of those things that decide who is going to be in charge of their tax dollars or in their lives, because election outcomes affect everybody, whether you are a Democrat, Republican, or independent, or none of the above, it affects everybody. Then, if you don't take interest in matters of the government, yeah, you're destined to be ruled by fools.
Mm-hmm. That's so true, Phani. And I want to get into some of the examples that you shared in your testimony. If you could tell the audience about the Civil War veteran, you heard me right, everybody, a Civil War veteran who was registered to vote in 2008.
Yes,
Could you please share that
yes,
story with us?
absolutely. If you don't mind, I'll just show the website itself.
Please.
Yeah, let's just go let's escape this window. So go to checkmyvote.org. I'll just make it dark so it's better visible. So this is an address we found through our volunteers' work. People are constantly checking things out in their communities, and this address pulls up a record of an individual named Jason Lemoyne Daniel. And you see the birth year here, 1850. Registration, like you just said, 2008. And it's in a challenge status. Well, you could dismiss this off saying, it's okay, this person will be removed. But did this person have a say in the 2020 election? Let's find out. So what you're seeing here is details about this person. And again, you'll see the year of birth, 1850, the address we put in, permanent absentee, no. But you also see here a full grid of their voting history as recorded in the Michigan's voter rolls. And as you see here, there are the snapshots of the qualified voter file. I get one a month. The latest one I have is the May 2025. And then the one before that is April. And I track it because very often you see that people's voting history is missing and then it comes back and it flip-flops. That's why I show a trail of what this looks like over time. In this case, it looks consistent. You want to see the same value from top to bottom, but I don't know if look at this, November 2020, this person actually voted according to the voter rolls. And as far as you go back, and actually up until February, we used to get the method of voting like I was describing earlier, and they said they won't give that data anymore. That's why it just shows as voted. But this person voted absentee, maybe because it was too old at 170 years old to walk to the polls to vote in person. But at 170 years old, this person voted in the November 2020 election.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Well, oftentimes, and I'm sure you've heard this, when you point out these examples of pure fraud, and no investigation by the Secretary of State, who, by the way, is currently running for governor, is going to be overseeing the election where she's running for governor. So in Michigan, you can't be a poll watcher or a poll worker if you're on the ballot in that particular precinct, but one can actually oversee the entire election while they're on the ballot running for governor. And there's a clear case of fraud in Jocelyn Benson, who needs to be in jail for rigging our elections. There's a clear case of fraud that she's not going to do anything about. And then the crazy part is that when you point this stuff out, they'll go, well, that wasn't enough fraud to overturn the election. I mean, that's not going to impact the results. Well, if that person, if a ballot was cast in the name of someone who's obviously deceased, he's not a 170-year-old person is walking around here, at least that I'm aware of, because if this guy is alive, we all need to talk to him and find out what he's doing to stay alive for 170 years. But nevertheless.
Exactly. It's like saying that it's like saying there's a little fire in the corner of my house. Oh, it's not enough to burn down the house. I'll leave it like that and I'll go to work, and then by the time you come back home, the fire is a little bigger.
Yeah.
And a system that allows this is what the concern is. A system that allows this, whether it's rare or whatever you want. I don't think it's rare, by the way, because there are tons of examples like this. And a system that allows this kind of thing to happen is concerning of itself. I mean, you don't have to go to the magnitude of the problem. At what point will she start paying attention? When there are 10,000 of these people? When there are 100,000? When? Right?
It's interesting, Phani, is that to your point, when we point these things out, they were like, well, we don't know if number one, it's not my job to conduct a citizen's investigation about if there's inaccurate voter rolls. When you have one example, that's one too many. And it is her job as Secretary of State to make sure that never happens again and find out how that person was registered to vote, unless she was involved in making sure these people were registered to vote. There were these registrations, because these aren't people, because clearly this person is deceased. But or maybe doesn't even exist at all. I don't know if there's any way to look into see if this individual existed at all, because this is isn't the only example of fraudulent registrations. Could you talk about, or could you share a few others? Because you talked about some like folks at being registered to vote at vacant lots, apartment buildings registration, because that's interesting. I've heard of situations. Let's say you have an apartment building that's 5 floors, and you know many apartment buildings like 501, or apartment 101 is the first floor, apartment 202 is the second floor. And let's say you have a 5-story apartment building, and there'll be somebody registered to vote at apartment 705 when there's not 7 floors. So can you talk about some of the other ways that they corrupt the voter registration database in addition to deceased people being registered to vote?
Oh, yes, thank you. There is duplicates. Like, let's say, you remember how the Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson pushed back on the SAVE Act, saying it's going to somehow disenfranchise married women because they don't know how to change their last name, and then it's somehow going to disenfranchise them. Well, look at this example. Let's go to this address here. There's many such examples. I could keep going, but let's just take a few examples
Yes,
here.
please.
And this is, and anybody could do this in their community. They could go, if you type, once you type 6 letters, it'll pull up the address in the voter roll. And this is a home. It looks like in the map, it shows like a home with a lot here, but seemingly this individual is living with 2 women with the name that here, and the middle initial is slightly, one of them has got a single letter, but the other one has a fully spelled out middle name. And you got the birth year of 1960 in both cases. And the last name, if you notice, is one. Here is one name, and the other one is a hyphenated last name. So clearly, this is one of a case where she must have changed her last name. She was educated enough; she knew how the process is. It's a simple process to change your last name, and she did it. But somehow it looks like the corrupt voting systems we have, and we note the voter ID here. This is one of the voter IDs of this individual, and that's the name, and this is the voter ID. And just note that voted in August 2024, voted. And let's go pick the other one. Just take note of this, 2335417. I'll choose the other one now. This is the 1611 with the same name, similar name. Look at this. Well, it's a different voter ID for the same name with a hyphenated last name. Voted in August 2024. So now what are the odds that these 2 are different women living with the same guy in the same house? I mean, very likely, but no, not impossible, but highly unlikely, right? And I could go on and on with these kind of examples. There is another one. Let's go to the, this is another one. These 2 people have very similar names, same birth year.
Oh, and it really quick, Phani, if I may comment, that just like the other example you showed me, they were both born in 1960.
Yes.
Everybody's born in 1960. Very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And this individual did not vote, but could. We don't know. Maybe, yeah. Actually, one of the individuals voted twice here. Look at this. According to the December voter roll, this individual voted 2 times in the 2024 November election, and then one vote was scrubbed, and it just shows as 1 as of May. But if you pull up the December's QVF, this person's record shows as if has voted twice. So
this is so infuriating.
Yeah, this is about, why wouldn't people lose trust when they see things like this?
And then being, portrayed as crazy people, criminals, insurrectionists for asking Jocelyn Benson to please fix this matter. That's the part that, to me, would be terrifying if this woman was ever to become our governor. Because for someone to be, I personally think Jocelyn Benson is a sociopath. Because to sit and just lie to the public and rig our elections and lie to us, you are wicked. She's wicked to the core. So to see somebody that wicked and want to gaslight the public, these people are crazy, they potentially need to be saying prison time for asking me these questions, and now she wants to be our governor. Can you imagine what she would be like as governor? She would be
tyrant,
a complete tyrant. She would be a complete tyrant. So
100%. Yeah, these people are power-hungry maniacs. They want full godlike control over humans and humanity, and they'll do anything to get there.
Yeah, and they can play all the videos. Yeah, they can play all the videos of her line dancing, south the polls. All they want, these politicians do this stupid stuff. They go places dancing and carrying on to try to show the public, look, they're just like one of us. It's just another one of their psyops. Funny, I have another question. You all believe also had some evidence of folks being registered to vote at vacant lots.
Yes. Yep.
You share that information with us as well.
Yes. Oh, before we go there, do you mind if I pull up another record here?
Please. Show,
This is
please.
another address here. I just typed in 15462, this address here, and we
Mhm,
see 5 people registered to vote here. I'll just sort by the birth year,
mhm,
and you see 2 people here with a similar name, very very similar. Year of birth is 1997.
mhm,
One of them registered to vote in 2018, the other one is 2020, and the middle name is basically spelled out in one of the instances, and the other one is just the initial. Two different
mhm,
voter IDs, both active. Now let's see some details on the first one. 340. Just remember that we're on the 340. Voted in the November 2024 election. Okay. Let's go
mhm,
to the other one, starting with the number 2000. Voted in the November 2024 election. So we can go on and on about that. These are the duplicates. This is where the big bloat in the voter rolls is coming from, and the bloated rolls are contributing to bloated votes, essentially canceling out a valid vote from an individual. Essentially, every
mhm,
extra vote cast by a person is canceling out a vote from another valid individual who voted. Right? So, and empty lots. We could go there next.
mhm,
That is, there's a news article I'll pull up here, and this news article essentially says, let me just pull up this one first. Let's read the article just briefly, just so we can understand what that's about. So, this article is about a fire destroying in Ionia County. This is Hotel California, it's called, but there's a boarding house
mhm.
at this address, 663 West Main. What did I do there? I think it just refreshed the screen or oh yeah, there. I won't click anything. I think this website is weird. But yeah, it was targeted by the city for demolition, and one of our volunteers even went there and took a picture. Even now, there's no building there, or as of at least 2024, before the election, there was no building there. So 663 West Main in Ionia. Let's type that address in. Ionia. Search that. Now there's 4 registrations here, and these clipboards indicate that our volunteers have done some work and basically entered some notes here. Basically, this person, we don't put their names here because we don't need to. It's just the information, their research, their work is more important for us. Hotel California boarding house was destroyed by fire in June 2023, and they even put the article here. That's how I got the article's link. But look at this. June 2023, it was destroyed by fire, but this individual actually voted there. And if you go to the address in here, it's actually an empty lot. It doesn't pull up here, 663 West Main Street. Go to maps.google.com. Maybe they built something here now, but at the time of November 2024 election, it was an empty lot.
Wow. So people are registered to vote at an empty lot.
Yeah, this address doesn't even exist actually right now. There's no 663. This is 623. So Google kind of puts up in randomly locations, but our volunteers has actually driven over here and found that this was raised to the ground, and that's when they put this information here. And
Mm.
we have been challenged one of them, but it's not removed yet. Still there in the voter rolls. So all these people
But
are there from an empty lot.
and there's another point I want to mention too, Phani, is that oftentimes you talk to, and some people say, well, what is the local clerk doing? And I know you can speak to this. There are many times, and when I ran for SOS, I talked to a lot of local clerks who would
Hmm.
say, we have removed these dead people or non-existent
Hmm.
people or what
Yeah.
have you. The local clerk has updated the street index, and what that is, the street index is the job of the local clerk to update to make sure that the residential addresses are listed as residential or commercial because people cannot be registered to vote at commercial addresses. So the
Hmm.
local clerk has updated the street index. The local clerk has removed these dead people. The local clerk has removed these non-existent people. But yet, magically, thanks to Jocelyn Benson, Department of her Department of State that she's running, her Secretary of State's office, they keep adding on these dead or non-existent people back into the voter rolls that the local clerk has removed. Please tell me if I'm wrong about that.
No, you're not wrong about that. You're absolutely right because we all too often hear that local clerks are doing their darned best to get it accurate. And I can understand when you're doing your best to clean up, like you're sweeping the floor. Let's say I'm sweeping the floor, and someone is throwing mud at it after I swept it up. How would I feel? I'd be frustrated. I'd be at some point
Mhm.
I'd give up. I'd say I'm not going to clean these floors anymore. I mean, these people are muddying up my work, right? Similarly, same thing with some of the clerks. They are cleaning them up, but magically these registrations are appearing into the voter rolls from the state because of whatever they've got going on there. They just dump this stuff into the flood these precinct level voter rolls with the registrations, and at some point clerks are going to get frustrated, and that's what's going on. It's called the Lazarus effect. I mean, I call it the Lazarus effect. They reemerge into the voter rolls. And I don't know when this Jason Lemon Daniel, the Civil War veteran we talked about, may have gotten to the voter rolls, because I'm sure at some point that person got removed and we don't have voter rolls that back. But this has been going on for a long while. We just have information from recent times because we only started paying attention to this problem of election integrity and voter rolls being bloated.
Yeah, I think in 2020, because there was a lot of things like the ballot muling operations that they did, where a person would show up with 50 absentee ballots, and I think that myself and many others began to realize, how is it that someone can get an absentee ballot for another person? Because that would require me to go to their address, get the ballot, then bring them in. But then when you're allowed to reroute absentee ballots to any address, and I can get anybody as long as I got the last 4 of your social security number. I
Yeah.
can reroute an absentee ballot to myself. And
Right.
if you have fraudulent registrations, I'm sure that information has been provided to the ballot mule people, because you would think, well, how hard is it to get somebody, the last 4 of somebody's social security number? Well, if it's a fake registration and the Secretary of State is involved in helping provide these fake registrations, they're going to necessarily provide all the other data that can help them funnel all these absentee ballots to a particular address. Then they fill out the ballots and then go
Right.
dump them somewhere. We saw that situation in Muskegon County where someone had dropped off a bunch of absentee,
Right.
a bunch of voter registration forms.
Right.
The Muskegon clerk was confused as to why this one person dropped off all these voter registration forms in the same handwriting. So then the Muskegon police went to go and investigate, and via their investigations, they wound up at a place in Southfield. And from what I recall, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if you remember or not. So I'm pretty sure, but I want to have a disclaimer. I could be wrong with this minor detail, but I'm pretty positive I am correct on this, that Joe Biden and some other Democrats had given money to this organization, GBI Strategies, I believe.
Yeah.
But they
There was a
given
story
money.
about that.
Yeah, they gave
Yeah.
money to that organization, from what I recall, for certain types of voter registration effort. But then this various organization was involved in what appears to be criminal activity, and I have to say appears because they haven't been convicted, and I don't want to get sued.
Right.
But
Right.
but nevertheless, when the police conducted a raid at a location in Southfield that is supposedly to be connected with them, they found they found burner phones, disposable debit cards. They found guns with suppressors. Suppressors is what many people call a silencer, but it's actually called a suppressor. Optics that you could put on a gun, all kind of things. So it's like, well, what kind of voter registration operation were y'all conducting when y'all needed that kind of firepower to register people to vote? So, I mean, this is a type of corruption that we're talking about. So I really hope the audience doesn't glaze over at the tedious nature of this conversation, because it's like, oh, this is so tedious. Guys, this is the key to our freedom. All the other stuff you whine and complain about politics, if we're not selecting the people in office, they don't care about what you think. You are a peon. You are trash. Because why should they care what you have to think? Because they're going to rig the elections and you're not going to do anything about it. So why would they care what we have to say? So this is a matter of national survival that requires us to lawfully and peacefully remedy systemic election corruption. Phani, I do want to respect your time. We're going to have not final words, but, wrapping up, what solutions do you have? What can we do? Obviously, please visit checkmyvote.com or .org.
It's .org.
.org. Thank you. So
Yes.
please, everybody, visit checkmyvote.org, especially if you live in Michigan. I know you have some other states you're working with, Tennessee and Ohio as well. Check if you're a watcher from Tennessee or Ohio, checkmyvote.org. Look into this matter. But Phani, what are some solutions? You talked about solutions during your testimony in front of the Michigan House Election Integrity Committee. Can you share some of those solutions that you have?
Yes, thank you. So the solution is essentially built into this checkmyvote.org website. You go to the www website, it's always been the same, and you just click whichever state, Michigan in our case here. And once you get in there, if you get an account, sign up at the top. I'm signed in right now, but I won't sign out because I want to show you what you can do here. If you could pick your, precinct or county or your local area that you are present in, You could look at the problems facing your township. Let's pick Elegant Township, and you can drill down to the lowest level you want. You could go to any specific area, and you could look at all the problems that exist here. You could see what's going on in terms of month after month, how many duplicates got removed because of our work, and you could sign up as a volunteer to go check what's there for review. And if you have a bunch of duplicates here, you could go research them. And obviously, we don't want to remove both the duplicates from the registration. Look at this one; it's got the exact same address, and again, similar last name. There's a middle name that's different. Someone needs to door knock here and confirm which one is the actual one, which one is the good one. Looks like someone already did some work here and send it over to a clerk. So confirming the three-step process: identify, verify, rectify.
Mm-hmm.
Identify, pre-identify step is done by Check My Vote, and it gives you all these categories where the problems are. And if you're an expert in calling nursing homes and finding out how many beds are there, you could do that. Or you could check with the door knock, like door knock, sure, you could do that. And that's verification. Rectify is basically putting a challenge to the clerk and saying, one of these is wrong. Could you please, we've done 99% of the work. Could you please take it over to the finish line? So that's the work our volunteers do, and sign up, sign in, and find your precinct, or even you can work at the county level too. But I suggest get down to the township level, because the MCL 168.512 allows you to file challenges and bring things to rectification. Like, this is the MCL I'm talking about, and you have to be in the same jurisdiction. That is why I said work at the jurisdiction level. Like, pick your jurisdiction and go through these pre-identified items that Check My Vote's algorithms have identified, and you could take it from there, get them all the way to the challenge state.
Okay, Phani, I have another question. I know I had asked you for your final thoughts really about how we can remedy the problem, but I had one other question I kind of forgot to ask. Do you have an estimation of how many, should I say, corrupted registrations or fraudulent registrations you think there are? Because there was something I think that was really important that you mentioned during your House testimony. You mentioned we have about 8 million registered voters or 8 million citizens, but then the amount of people we have as registered voters is larger than the voting age population. And that's one thing I would like you to speak on. Number two, how many fraudulent registrations do you think there are, or maybe you don't know the information yet?
So thank you for that question. So according to the July 2023 census, Michigan had about, this is open information. We go to census.gov, pick Michigan, you'll see it's about 10 point some million people. Out of that, about, I think 79% of them were of voting age population, and that's also on the census.gov. So that basic math here, 5th grade math, you come out with a number of 7.9 million-ish of voting age population. Now, mind you, that also includes non-citizens, that also includes ineligible people who can't vote, shouldn't be voting, etc. So, but let's just go with 7.9 million because I don't know how many are non-citizens, right? So the number of people in Michigan's May voter roll is 8.19 million. So right there, you have a 219,000 excess.
Okay, and that's just with the age issue.
That just with the age, exactly. And there is, of course, non-citizens. There is people who moved out that since 2023, people have been moving out of Michigan, not in. That's also recorded as Michigan is one of the only few states where people are moving out. So it's much less than that too. So as an estimate, my website, the Check My Vote, what it does is it makes a first pass at all the data, and anywhere between 360,000 to 520,000 registrations, it marks for review, meaning it's like a first pass. Because just because you're over 100 doesn't mean you're ineligible to vote, right? I mean, most of them have passed away, but that's up to the volunteers to determine. So out of that, I would say anywhere between 364 to 550,000. And that's a very conservative estimate, because I don't want to go overboard and estimate like excess. That's the bare minimum. I'm saying that is the minimum bottom end. So
wow,
yeah,
wow. Phani, I would like to give you the last word. What are some closing thoughts you have for us about the election system and how what are your closing thoughts on this whole matter? Because this is something, to me, it's the most important issue in our country right now. And we can say, well, what about this issue? What about this issue? It's like all the other issues politically that we're unhappy about, You're not going to be able to solve them until we clean up the election system. So this is the most important issue. What would you like to leave the audience with?
Well, we just with the same thing that we started with. Election outcomes affect everybody, even if you don't vote because you don't trust the system. Even then, election outcomes affect you. It's possible that your identity is being used to vote, even though you personally don't vote. There is things that like that also, as we have seen in the data. So my message is to stay active in your community, because that's where it all begins. And checkmyvote.org is built from the ground up. As you could see, you could drill down to your precinct and see what's going on in terms of the voter rolls. And of course, mind you, voter rolls is only one piece of the problem or the puzzle in the whole entire spectrum of election integrity. But if you can contribute in the area of cleaning up voter rolls, that is something. If you can contribute in the area of being a poll challenger, that's another thing. It's up to you. Find your calling and do what you can. Because in the end, whoever gets into power decides how much taxes you pay, what they get to do with their tax dollars. And we are seeing that our tax dollars are being used to impose tyranny back on us. How do you like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also I would add to that, Phani. I'm sorry I said I would give you the final word, but I still have one more comment to your point. All right, like you said, our tax dollars being used back on us. How about if they institute a draft? Then they'll send our children to war.
Right.
So it's tons and tons of issues. But thank you so much, Phani. I really appreciate all the work that you do. Please, everyone, visit checkmyvote.org. Support his effort. Phani is a man who's just worked so tirelessly on this project that I know it's a labor of love, but it's still a lot of responsibility. So please support his effort, volunteer, get involved. Thank you again, Phani, for joining us today.
Thank you, Kristina. Thank you.
I hope you all enjoyed the interview with Mr. Phani Mantrivadi regarding the corruption in our qualified voter file and what we can do to remedy it. And even if you don't live in Michigan, you need to look into your voter registration database. If you enjoyed this content, please support the Karamo Report. As I'm sure you are aware, it costs to produce this show, and we want to keep this content free. So we would appreciate your support. So visit theKaramoreport.com and give us a contribution. We would appreciate it. So thank you. God bless.